Hey, how you doing, everybody? This is me, Chris Smith here. You know this by now, or if you don't, then go ahead and subscribe, and that's great. But today we're not talking about me. We're going to be talking about a topic that I just actually wanted to kind of speak up on, and that's the lack of a single player. Now, I have not played Battlefront. I know many people have, but I have yet to actually do that. For this review, we're going to be talking about the lack of single player in these games, or specifically the lack of single player in some games that tend to actually not really focus on the campaign, and sometimes the contradictions for gamers and developers and whatnot. So my thoughts on this thing is pretty much that for Star Wars Battlefront, as you most likely have seen, I kind of touched upon this on the video before, was that they didn't want to have a campaign. They decided to kind of just go full multiplayer, just go for challenge maps and new skins and whatnot. Now, for me personally, as I kind of said in my other video, is that I don't necessarily think that's actually a very smart idea. Now, some gamers said they, for example, like Call of Duty, is that they don't necessarily actually play the campaign. They play for the multiplayer. But then, I'm hearing people talk about how they absolutely were pissed that they didn't have a single player, experience in Battlefront. Now, for me, personally, if a game's going to have multiplayer, then have multiplayer, But for the most part, I want a game also for a story. Now, granted, if you're a fan of Star Wars or whatnot, that's great and that's awesome. But don't let that necessarily cloud your judgment, because for one, you have to realize that because I said this already before, but do you want your playthrough experience to have fun, a funful meaning, or do you actually want to kind of be like, yeah, I got my money's worth? Are you going to pay? Because remember, you're paying extra for the DLCs. You're paying extra for any extra content. You're paying nearly $120. You want to pay $120 for a game that's just multiplayer. There's not a real reason to care for this game. Because remember, at the end of the day, eventually multiplayer will stop. That game will stop. So unless, if the game has a story, then you can actually care for that story constantly. Even if nobody else cares for that story, you care for that story. You care for the characters, care for settings, the music, whatever it is. Now, granted, it has everything. It's almost like an empty world. Now, yeah, there might be some slight, just like this much. You see that? Yeah, that right there. If you see my eye, probably not. Well, that's the story. That's how small of the story it is, and most likely this multiplayer game or any multiplayer game. Destiny. I know some people that play Destiny, they did not actually get much of anything. People paid for Destiny, and then they got the expansion pack, right? They bought that, and then they got the Taken King, and then what do you know? You get like this big extra edition with all that stuff. So technically, you almost feel like you just wasted your money, because you actually can save the cash, because it'd be about the exact same price as a regular type of game, but instead, the company just kind of like raped you of your wallet and whatnot. So, does a single player affect the game? Not necessarily, but I think a single player enhances the game. If I'm gonna it's like an open world game, right? Whenever I play an open world game, I don't like to do the side quests after the game. I like to do the side. If I'm gonna do side quests in an open world game, I'm doing the side quests in the middle of the story while the story is still going on. Because for me, at least, if I'm just doing nothing, just doing quests and whatnot, that doesn't necessarily have a meaning to the story, or it's not really going anywhere, then for me personally, I'm not going to really care, because it's not really a meaning coming from it. I do in between. I'll do it. Obviously, once the story starts, you can't do a side quest, but like once it starts, then they kind of let you off to this world, and then I can do side quests in between days. I'm not going to do side quests after, because there's not really a point. There's no reason really to go on. So for Battlefront, for them to just kind of give you no single player, some people say they don't really care for single player, but then they complain about not having single player. I guess it depends on what game you're playing, but then, that's, the irony of us gamers. Sometimes you can't please us. Sometimes you can please us, but at the end of the day, somebody's going to be complaining, because that's this community. I complain, you complain, we all complain for games. But yeah, I think we don't. The way I see it, does anybody really want to pay $110 for multiplayer? You don't, do you? Because I guarantee you don't. You're just going to be playing around and doing real nothing, flying around. That's great, but you got to realize, I think a story is more important than just, action. Like don't get me wrong, I liked it, but for Man of Steel, people said I had too much action, not enough story. Now, granted, you could be like, well, the Star Wars world has enough lore to just carry it without actually having a story, and I say that's bullshit. Take your goggles off. Look at it actually from the big picture here. You're kind of getting screwed. Don't make your nostalgia kind of ruined what exactly you're doing. Don't get blinded by that. As I said in another one, judge it from your own merits. Are you getting your money's worth? Do you actually want a story to care for, or do you want to just fly ships around? Because if you do, then wait for the Star Wars Battlefront virtual reality thing. Because I guarantee you, EA's going to be on it. They're going to be, EA and DICE, they're just going to be like, sure, why not virtual reality? People like to just fly around, shoot lightsabers, and sure, that may be fun until the clunkiness start happening. But this whole point is, I think a single player needs to happen. Whether you play it or not, I think it's best to have the single player and no multiplayer than a multiplayer with no single player. To me, it's almost like having a movie without a cast or a movie without a title. You have a great movie, right? People are acting, they're doing whatever it is, but without a plot, there's not necessarily anything to go off of. Like, for example, The Counselor. If anybody's seen that movie, great cast, right? Brad Pitt, Javier Bardem, Penelope Cruz, whatever. They're all great, but there was no plot in the movie. You see what I mean? It's like, sure, they're doing these actions and whatnot, but without an actual plot to move the story around, you kind of feel like you're just wasting time here, and they're just kind of going through the motions, and it doesn't really mean anything. So yeah, so do we need single player in these games? I guarantee your ass we need single player in this game. Why? Because if we don't have it, then we're just going to get it. Also, another thing to touch on, what the hell is going on with some of these games where these open world games where they don't end? What the fuck happened to the credits? Destiny had no credits, Fallout 4 had no credits. To me, that's some bullshit right there. Because for one, for Fallout 4, it was no ending. Now, granted, if you have to do all the side quests, which I have no problem with per se, but I do like to kind of carry the story. But for Fallout 4, if I have to do all the side quests to get like the end credits for it to actually have a full ending, then I say that's terrible. Destiny, you're just like left wandering there after the final battle, and then you're just like, wait a minute, hold on, is this it? Are we not going to get credits? I can't see credits. I actually like to see the credits. It makes me feel like the game has been completed. Without the credits, you're just like standing there waiting for a damn bus that doesn't come. To me, it just leaves you pointless. Fallout 4 did it. It makes the story just feel like it's just left. It's kind of like if you ended the game Red Dead Redemption with Jack, and you don't know where to go, and you just be like, well, I guess I defeated the game. John Marston's dead, right? Nothing else to do. Might as well just go home. And then you just kind of end the game and just be like, well, I guess that was the end. But it wasn't the end, obviously. There was more things to do. But my point is, it has to have a story. Don't let these developers half-ass this shit. If you do, gaming as a whole would just be one big money-grubbing business. And that means even worse than it is now. So I'm just saying that make sure your wallets are safe. Make sure you're choosing the right deals. And make sure these developers don't get away with their bullshit endings. Just kind of throw that out there for these single players. But this is my thoughts. What do you people think? Do you think single player is as important or a multiplayer? Another thing, also Assassin's Creed, people wanted a multiplayer, but Syndicate, wasn't as bad. Would you rather have Syndicate's multiplayer, calling it as a multiplayer, or would you have the story that at least is stuck on track? Sometimes it's like the developers can't have two minds or two teams, one on a story, one on a multiplayer. They can't do that, so therefore they fuck it up. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Should we have single player? Should we have multiplayer? Should we have both? Or should we have one or the other? If you think one or the other, which one would you rather prefer? The single player or the multiplayer? Mine's, I choose a single player. Screw multiplayer. We don't need it. Not for $110. I'll pay $110 for the story. Hell, I wouldn't even pay $110 for the story. But still, that's not the point. Throw that multiplayer out. It don't matter. Add it to the story. Those are my thoughts. Comment, subscribe. Like that shit. This has been Chris Smith. I'm signing out.